if we could reach that level of building to our need, you would see positive social and economic growth for the residents of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
You'd see businesses thrive. You'd see individuals thrive. Your kids would stay. Your grandkids would stay. Your friends and family would find happiness and a place to live. There'll always be trials and tribulations. There'll always be struggle and strife. That's life. Change is inevitable. But if you can meet the needs of housing, and you can house with dignity, and you can house with respect, and you can give people opportunity, we all do better.
Yeah.
It's just simply all do better.
You are listening to Granite Goodness, the show where we interview New Hampshire people making the world a better place. My name is Andy DeMeo, and today's episode was recorded in Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. My guest today is Matt Gallant. Matt is the Senior Manager of Business Development and Home Ownership Fellows Organizer at the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, where he helps to make home ownership happen for more people in more places across the Granite State. We talk about why housing is so expensive, what we can all do about it, what we collectively stand to gain by saying yes in my backyard instead of not in my backyard, and a bunch of other things on this episode of Granite Goodness. I hope you enjoy it. Matt Gallant, welcome to Granite Goodness.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
I'm so glad you're here. I mean, we've been talking since the moment you got out of your car, and I moved my car. We're squeezed in. We're triple parked right there.
Literally.
Because we just had to get you on the show as soon as possible. We have so much to talk about. My opening question for you, I've been listening to, we're going to start with something very controversial.
I love it. You've obviously met me, but no, I'm just kidding.
That's right.
Controversy is my middle name.
We're just going to dig right into it. The other day, you posted your holiday playlist. And
the suit jacket to sell it for you, didn't it?
Right. That was very suave. There's a lot we could dig into there.
Style.
Thanksgiving hasn't even happened yet.
It didn't. Well, it did for me yesterday.
Okay.
And I try to get for a couple of years now, I've been putting out this annual holiday playlist. And it's become this thing. I don't know. We all have things, right? Like we do something, even if nobody cares, we feel better about doing it.
Yeah.
And one day I was sitting in my office, and I'm known for singing at my office places.
Move that a little closer to you.
We get it good.
Perfect.
Better.
Yeah.
So I'm known for walking around the halls singing. Have been for years.
I don't
drove
doubt that.
people nuts.
Yeah.
So I started just like listening to the holiday playlist, and I found that none of them were long enough. None of them were the music I liked. So I just started like curating this list, and it turned into like, someone's like, you should post this on LinkedIn a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So I did. And then people had their own take on music for holidays, right?
Yeah.
Christmas and whatnot. So I started just like saying, all right, I'll add it. And now we're up to like 9.5 hours of
it's a full work day's worth.
It's a full work day's worth. And depending on what you work, it's a good playlist, and it runs the gambit. So,
right.
And then of course I had to get like, a professional photo with me in like a holiday suit and tie.
Looking like a Sinatra.
You had to. So like it was just a thing. So now it's another thing. So I posted it. Thanksgiving hasn't officially happened yet.
I was going to say, you don't think that you jumped, do you do it this early every year?
Typically, yeah.
Because this is a massive kind of cultural debate that we have of like, when does the holiday season begin? After Thanksgiving, after Halloween?
Well, it's become, I mean, if you look at like retail, if you just like, what benchmark do you want to use? You use retail as a benchmark. It started in August.
Okay.
I mean, there's stuff out, this
so
Home
you should
Depot.
have posted it in August. Then.
Yeah, no, that's just, that would be insanity.
Yeah.
But we're close enough now. And, when the kids start asking me to put the Christmas tree out, or they start asking to decorate, or they're planning what they're going to do to decorate, we do a pretty elaborate, porch decoration for each holiday. Then, the list starts coming out.
Okay.
So. Yeah.
Well, I stake my flag in this debate. Like, I never ever will get my tree before Thanksgiving. It's like an immutable law of physics in my household. That's how I was raised.
Yeah.
It's how I want the tradition to be passed on.
Sure.
The moment Thanksgiving's done, like you can even do it the night of.
As soon as the turkey's cleaned up.
As soon as the meal, right. Well, it's a great activity to do post Thanksgiving because you're all full of the what is it?
Tryptophan.
Tryptophan. Yeah, that's. I was gonna say tannins, and I'm like, no, that's a thing.
That's
in wine.
a wine. Yeah. I love it.
Right.
I mean, you're still full of that too.
Yeah,
right.
for
Tannins
sure.
and tryptophan.
That's right.
That could be a holiday song.
Lazily, drunkenly going to get my Christmas tree. Hopefully not driving. Definitely not driving.
No.
And then, but definitely drunkenly putting the tree up.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So this is going to be a very smooth transition that you're going to appreciate. So I was going through your playlist. I liked a lot of the songs that you chose.
Yep.
My favorite choice
Uh-oh.
is that you included the Hot Chocolate song from Polar Express.
Yeah. Why not? It's a great movie.
Yes. Love that movie. Seen it a million times. It's sung by Tom Hanks.
Yep.
He plays like 90% of the characters in that movie,
Yeah.
I think.
He's iconic. So
Yeah. No, he's a real legacy. And there's a line in that song, it's about, for the viewers who haven't seen the Polar Express, it's a bunch of kids drinking hot chocolate on the Polar Express, and there's a line that Tom sings, because I know him, we're on a first name basis, and he says, here we only got one rule, never ever let it cool.
Yep.
Did you include that because it describes the housing market in New Hampshire?
Well, I'd like to say the housing market hasn't cooled.
Yeah.
But Tom would be upset with the with the housing market.
Well, he
New
says
Hampshire-
never ever let it cool.
Right, and you should never ever let the housing market cool. But dynamics come into play, so that's a good leeway. I like how you stuck that in there. Tom Hanks, just to answer your question, why that song's in there is because my 10-year-old at the time, now 12-year-old, was obsessed with that movie, and I'm secretly obsessed with that movie.
I'm just openly obsessed with it.
Yeah, and he wanted it in the playlist. He said I don't hear it enough, and he wanted, so that's why it's in there. That's
Yeah.
why honestly, I started saying like friends and family and like people put their
Right.
input. I think Max, my son, had the most input on the songs that were in there.
Yeah.
There's some Jimmy Fallon songs mixed in there, which were all dictated by him.
Sure.
So, that's good round. It's rounded off well.
It's actually a good playlist.
So the housing market.
Well, no, we'll get there. I wanna follow the formula. It's a good formula. Let's begin, Matt. By the way, I love your name, Gallant.
Gallant, yeah.
For the people who aren't watching on video, he's actually wearing a suit of armor right now. And he's all about chivalry and honor and how do we make housing better and easier for everyone, wearing a suit of armor.
Yeah.
That's actually the mission statement of the New Hampshire Housing Authority. That's a joke.
That's a joke.
That's a joke. It's not, but he is actually wearing a suit of armor. Matt, can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with New Hampshire? Like,
Yeah.
Are you from here? I assume
Born
you
and
live around
raised.
here.
Yeah, so born and raised in Barrington, New Hampshire. And I built my house that I live in now. I think it's like 100 yards away from where I grew up as a
That's
kid.
so cool.
So I didn't leave.
Yeah.
I didn't go anywhere.
You went 100 yards away.
Literally 100 yards away. I mean, I have lived in Somersworth for a little while, right? But moved back when I
Yeah.
built my house. We had kids, and I knew I wanted to raise them. You go back to what's familiar,
Yeah.
especially with kids, and so we live in Barrington, New Hampshire.
Wait, how did you learn how to build your house? Like, where did you learn that?
Oh, I bought my house pre-built and had it set on my home on a foundation. I did not build. Now, I will say, like, my wife and I are very handy people.
Yeah.
We built our barn that we had our goats and chickens
Okay,
and
so
turkeys in.
that's still, I'm impressed.
Yeah. I just learned how to do it. Honestly, YouTube.
Yeah.
How I do a lot of my education, like when it comes to like things I need to figure out, I watch YouTube videos,
Yeah.
and we figured out. My wife is she's a genius, actually. Like she's super intelligent. She's
Tell
an
me
amazing
about
woman,
it.
and she's like mathematically focused. Like
Yeah.
she's a give her lines and mathematical formulas and figuring out. So she'll actually like draw out the blueprints. She'll actually so she's good at that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm just the oaf that walks around swinging a hammer, cutting the wood, and
You
like
and I are the
lifting it.
same person. I swear to
Makes
God.
it easy, right? Like, so I just figured out by, obviously her telling me what to do, and it's
Right.
worked out. We've been, I'm almost 40. We've been together since we were 16. And, so it's just worked out with me doing what she tells me to do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to change that formula.
It's my wife and I met when we were 16, Matt.
No way.
And she also does all the cranial work.
I don't have the room for that up there.
Right. Yeah. I'm just like, what am I chopping?
Yeah.
Move what to where?
Yeah, totally.
That's
right? And
great.
I'll figure out the least convenient way to move it.
Yes.
that I feel is the most convenient way.
Yeah.
And I'll get it to from point A to point B, right? She'll tell me like the 15 other different ways I could have done it better,
Right.
which is fine. I'll own that.
But it's done.
But it's done.
Yeah.
And there was minimal damage to everything.
Okay. Well, speaking of minimal damage, we want minimal damage done to people's prospects for having housing in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So in a very elegant transition, tell me about like your career. Like you're at this really cool spot. I've seen you on like LinkedIn. You just started popping up because I feel like we know a bunch of the same people. I love the stuff that you post.
Thanks.
It's really funny. I mean, housing's a really hard, serious topic.
It is.
And it's a great thing when it happens for people. But like you seem to bring this sense of like levity and can do and like let's find a way to get to yes for people.
Yeah.
That's just the vibe that I get from you. You seem like I've talking to you. You're the same person that like I see on the internet.
Yep.
Of just like you're jolly, you're like whoopee, but like also deeply knowledgeable about the problems and the issues. You know,
we've got them, and this is Granite Goodness, right?
That's right.
It's a positive podcast, and I think you can pull some positive stuff out of the housing industry in itself. There's always positive things going on, and you see a lot of people when you meet. Those people, those social media people. A lot of the things that you meet, when you see them on social media, they don't put their real voice out there.
Yeah.
And I find that inauthentic, right? You're not getting to know the person. You're getting to know what they do or what they think, but it's polished.
Yeah.
I've always found, throughout my career, I started as I worked in sales.
Take us through there. How'd you get here?
I've had a lot of jobs. I've had a lot of experience. Everything I've always done has been people focused, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sales jobs. Had 2 kids. Was working for AT&T corporate. Great benefits. It worked out when I had kids.
Yeah.
Really customer facing, customer focused. And then I got into banking and I went and worked at a credit union. I needed a day job, right? 9 to 5. I had to see my kids. I was working 7 days a week.
Right.
Had 2 young boys at home. So I switched over and then kind of got in, used my sales skills, my sales, abilities, and worked into lending, which then morphed into mortgage lending. Mm-hmm. Then I went to work at one of the bigger credit unions in the state. Worked as, leading their sales team, was a mortgage officer leading their sales team. And then I found like my niche, right? Like that first time home buyer, that person who just needed someone to care about their situation. I've always known to have too big of a heart. Always known to fall on my sword a little too often for people.
Right. I say Matt Gallant, just saying it again.
Yeah, it's just kind of how it was.
You must be tired of that. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. It's and it's funny to point out. I say Matthew Gallant, right? And my whole family says no, it's Gallant.
Yeah.
And they're really, even my kids, they're like, you say our name wrong. I'm like, it's been my name for 40 years.
Right.
I say it how I say it, but
I almost looked. I was like, oh, it's like the pastry, but that's a galette.
That's a galette.
That's a galette.
Yeah. I try to really Canadianize it. I don't know why. It's just a thing. It feels right to me.
Yeah.
But no, it's, and I found what I love to do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I always made my living as being the loan officer who just had to go to battle for everybody who was looked over, passed over, denied. And I would always try to find that twist.
Yeah.
How do I make this work?
Right.
And it became a passion of mine. So then I started teaching first-time homebuyer classes. Before they were like popular for loan officers to teach, I developed first-time homebuyer classes where we would meet at a brewery.
Yeah.
And again, this is now popular, but this was, I'm talking 10 years ago before it was.
Right.
And we meet at a brewery.
Combining these two things would have been unusual at the time, right?
Right. And I said, and it was a big thing for the company I was working for because they were like, no at first. And then somebody stepped in. Somebody higher up was like, this might not be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Right. Which I found a lot of the things I've done in life that have been successful. Somebody stood up for me and going, this might not be a bad idea.
Yeah. Everyone else is like, this is crazy, Matt.
Yeah.
And another was like,
this is against our mission statement. It's not how we want to be looked at. It's
we can't drink and talk about mortgages.
Right.
How could you?
Well, Mike, breweries are popular, right? They have been for a while now. So it's like, no, this works. So we got a lot of first-time homebuyers that had just no idea. They didn't understand FICO scores. They didn't understand credit. I had learned about all these like trials and tribulations that people were having, and nobody was teaching them.
Yeah.
There was no good resources online at the time. Now there is, but there wasn't. So they needed someone to teach them. And I thought, if I can teach you well before the transaction starts, my life's easier.
Right.
But you're in a better position. And so we kept rolling those out, and now it's a standard in most companies, right?
Yeah.
But we really pushed that. And that led to my next job as as a VP of lending, and then ultimately to this. But it's been following like that personal mission, right? And working at New Hampshire Housing, I mean, I literally get to do what I love every day.
Yeah.
Like literally every day. and it's not a job.
Yeah.
Like this is a fun career, you know, and but it's really just getting to see success. And if you follow our Facebook and you follow our LinkedIn, not just mine, but like New Hampshire
making housing happen.
Yeah, we're making it happen, and how we do that is unique. You know, most lenders can't do what we do.
Right.
It's not just a regular mortgage, but I get to do that every day, and I get to share the success stories of our partners. But I also get to see the success firsthand. I go to closings still.
Right.
Like I show up at closings, and they're like, "Why are you here?" I'm like, "Because I want to see joy."
Yeah.
Like there's literal tears falling because these people that are getting these loans, and the spectrum is really wide.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but these individuals they didn't feel like they had another option. Right. They may have, but they didn't know another option. And I get to be part of that every day. And it fills that little bucket in your soul.
Yeah.
Right. And it's all kind of culminated to the Matt Gallant career. Right. And where I am today, it's just being a part of something in someone's life, and maybe it's self-serving to a degree, but it's getting to see that pure joy on people's faces.
Yeah.
You don't get that very often.
Right.
Especially these days.
Yeah.
You don't get to see that piece of someone's life. I mean, this is a moment.
Well,
right?
And it takes forever. Like mortgages, right, have legendary amounts of paperwork and barriers, right, to speak of. And I like that you do that, and I'm not surprised by that at all, right, that, you know, I think what you do well is you take this thing that, again, for a lot of people, it's inaccessible. There's a lot of rules and things standing in the way. And like, you know, working for like, you know, the kind of like quasi governmental entity that you do is one thing, but, you know, you take that and in your role, you make this thing very human oriented, right? Which is not a thing that I think people are used to. Yeah. At least certainly like from a communication, like the fact that you're out there being like, no, I want to show up to your thing and like find a way to get to yes. It's not a thing that people are used to. Yeah. Certainly not from, you know, a lot of parts of government, right?
Well, definitely in that aspect of things, right? You see and I'm not going to knock the DMV, but you know, everybody has that image in their head. It's like no organization. They're not. But
no, there's reasons for that, and we don't, you know. But all right. So for the listeners, like who know nothing, what is New Hampshire Housing? Yeah. Or the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority?
Yeah, the official name.
Yeah, what makes them unique in this space? Yeah. You know, like dig into all that.
Sure. So, you know, I have this conversation a lot as I'm out there because you believe it or not, there's realtors and lenders who don't even know who we are. Sure. And I find that crazy in this day and age. But, you know, we are your state housing finance authority, right? We were created at a time, you know, in 1980s. We were created at a time wasn't much different than today. Rates were astronomically high. Affordability was at an all-time low.
Yeah, but glam rock though.
Yeah, glam rock. And now, you know, we help people afford home. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't need to be more complicated than that. Yeah. Because we're a quasi-government entity, and because, you know, we're self-funded, which a lot of people don't realize. We're not funded by the state legislature. Like we don't get money to operate. Yeah. We are self-funded. We're self-regulated to most degrees. We provide below market interest rates, really competitive mortgage rates, with down payment assistance, to just make homeownership more affordable. Yeah. We do that through various mechanisms that are in place, but the simple nature of it is we keep homeownership as affordable as possible. Yeah. And we help everybody from the baker, the retail worker, the service technician, all the way up to doctors, right? People like nurses, doctors, who are getting a home. We have an income cap, right? Yeah. So you can't be super rich to use our products. Right. But the income cap is $167,800. The median income in New Hampshire over the last census was $80,000. Yeah. So, you know, it's for most people. Right. And a lot of people don't know that. Yeah. And they look at our products and they are like, oh, those are for the impoverished. Well, yeah, we help them too. Yeah. But they're for anybody who's looking to make home just like that much more affordable than the general market.
And that's or rather, like, it's for anyone who's having a hard time getting home and who needs help. Yeah. And most of the time, I don't know that describes the people who like would, you know, wage out of the cap. Yeah. And that, I mean, I think that's most people today, right? Who like everyone has an experience of like, oh, like no one today is being like, boy, time to buy a house. That was easy.
Yeah, no, there's no Staples button for this.
Yeah,
There's no
said
easy button.
No one ever.
Yeah, no, and that's the truth. And when you look at the dynamics of the market, and we can get into the market, and we can get into some different pieces, but
wanna go
you
there.
look at the dynamics of the market today. Okay. And you're looking at the cost of homes. Now, I always use my personal experience as an experience because it's valid. I know it.
Right.
I know the figures. But 2016, I built my house.
Yeah.
Right. I don't live in a mansion. Right. And that's one of the things. I live in a modest ranch. That's a first-time home buyer.
Yeah.
Affordable home that could technically, in most markets, be considered workforce housing.
Yeah.
Right. Because I'm part of the workforce. And when we built our home, we built it for $198,000.
That's
brand new,
very affordable by today's
$198,000.
standards.
Oh yeah,
that's crazy.
Back then, it wasn't like that crazy, and 2016 was not that long ago.
Yeah,
and now just had it. I think it came in at like just shy of 500 or just over 500,000 in value.
Lord.
So when you look at that, right, those dynamics right there, you're looking at the starter home. We're in Rockingham County, right. As of most recent data, the average purchase price in Rockingham County was about $625. The average purchase price. Wow. When you look at those numbers, the low income buyers of yesteryear are now the moderate to high income buyers of then. So affordability has reached an all time low. Right. And you were struggling as a state to reach what is affordability? Where we're one of the most highly educated states in the country, right? I think you've had somebody on your podcast that was talking about that. And then you look at the economic factors of where we are as a state, and they're great. Right. And arguably that's like one of the worst things for housing is that the economic figures are so great.
Right. Except for
housing.
The ways they're not. Yeah,
except for the ways they're not. And housing has a huge play in that. Because when you dive into affordability, you start diving into availability of units. And when you have homeless shelters in Manchester filling with families, and you have, which I get emotional about this stuff. So, but when you have these,
deeply personal,
I do, and that's why when we're looking at these industries, like it's why I keep going. Everyone's like, "How do you have the energy to do all this?" Like, because it needs to be done. Someone's got to do it, right?
How do you have the energy to
not do it? So when you're looking at these, these shelters being filled with families, and we work in them. I run a couple of. I'm founder of a young housing professionals group, and my partner Rachel, who co-runs that with me. They're every other Tuesday, at least one Tuesday a month, where young housing professionals storm families in transition in Manchester, and we're filling these, working at these soup kitchens, and these are families. Like there's people with kids coming into these places. As a state, when we've reached that, that's the problem growing. Right. And you're looking at housing, a single, 2-bedroom apartment can't be afforded in the state by most professions, let alone our firefighters, our policemen, and the people who keep industries running, that workforce, can't even, can hardly afford a 1-bedroom, let alone a 2-bedroom. It's just, it's tough. So we can talk more about market, but
how did we get here? And
that's
I'm gonna
great question.
Well, I'll give you like my kind of perspective, and you can tell me how wrong it is. This is a solutions oriented show.
Yes, and there are solutions to this.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes people get the wrong idea. They think that like, optimism is about it's not about ignoring problems. I actually think that being solutions and progress oriented is like, it's actually a better way to tackle anything, as opposed to being like, well, there's no point and it's helpless. It's like, no, I don't think that at all.
There's nothing that's helpless in this world. There's nothing.
No, absolutely not. And so I read a lot about like all the issues you can think of and like what's being done, how does it get better, etc. And my sense as a layperson, Matt, on housing is that people they often argue past each other, right? On like one side you have the supply side people who are like, this is just, it's supply and demand, baby. We've been underbuilding and we got to build, and everything is downstream from that, right? Like, and then on the other side, you have the people who, and I understand, like I've been there and I was there and remain there spiritually, like who are maybe trying to buy a house or rent or do all the things today, and they said, you don't understand. I can't wait, 15 years for the supply to catch up. People are getting away with murder in the rental market. And all the new developments I see are, luxury apartment. And, I just want the government to try and make everything affordable. Right. And like,
Neither of those sides are right.
Right. Yeah. And
It's a mixture of both.
Tell me what's right and wrong about that.
Well, and this is, I always preface, this is Matt's opinion,
Yes.
right? And what I see as a professional out there, not necessarily New Hampshire House's position, but when I look at the market as a whole, right, and you need, both sides are right.
Right.
So it is a supply side. There is a supply and demand factor to here, right? If the demand picks up, right, and supply isn't there, then prices skyrocket like they have, right?
Yeah.
50% over 5 years or whatever it is. It's astronomical. Look at my house as an example, right? You have 198 to 500. I mean, that's a supply and demand. That wasn't because, my house got that much more valuable.
I fill it with gold.
Yeah, it's basically, I mean, housing is it's appreciated, I think, faster than gold. So when you're looking at, that piece, it is a supply and demand issue. Okay. There's lowering mortgage rates will not solve this problem. Okay. Because when you lower mortgage rates and more people qualify, your demand picks up, which means the supply limitations make housing more expensive.
Right.
Right. There's an argument that's out there by some of the talking heads that if rates go down low enough, the people who are waiting to sell because they have a really low rate will all of a sudden put their house on the market and want to move.
Yeah. Maybe some people.
I don't know that there's historical data to necessarily back that up. I'm sure there's some. If you want to parse out the data far enough, you can find that. But you talk to people who are comfortable at their 2% and 3% mortgage. I don't think a 4 or 5% mortgage is going to get them to cut and run.
Yeah.
And where are they going to go? Because there's not enough supply, right? So increasing inventory, right, naturally in the supply and demand mindset is really infiltrating inventory and just inflating it to the point where there's so much inventory will naturally drive down the cost.
Right.
And we've seen that already. They are building those luxury apartments you talked about. And a lot of the people who are on that side of not being able to afford those luxury apartments, their perception is that they're building, but they're not building for me. They're building for someone else. That's true. And that's okay. Yeah. Why is that okay? Because when you start building, builders need to make money.
Right.
Because while they can build out of the goodness of their heart, they're a business and they're not evil, but they need to turn a profit. There's more profit in those apartments. The nice thing is, for the downstream of it, right, is that there's going to be people moving into those apartments, which means other units are going to open up. So there's people who can't afford that unit. Right. They'll be able maybe to afford this unit. Right. And you can keep what I call the carousel of housing going.
Yeah.
You need a lot of different animals on the carousel to get everybody a turn.
Yeah.
And when if you're saying no to the luxury apartments because you don't want the perception of having too many luxury apartments, then nobody's going to be able to move anywhere.
Well, the rich people are going to move into the apartments that are there anyway. Right. So you might as well build something that they could spend more money on, and then kind of let it soak up more of the demand, right? Driving it up.
And you can build these, and I wouldn't even say they're luxury. I mean, I hate to say that, but not all of them are luxury. Are there some? Absolutely. I'm a realist. I always try to say I'm a realist.
Well, even what that means has probably changed a lot
dramatically.
There's
this new thing about apartments, and there's in Salem, New Hampshire, they've built a lot of luxury apartments. Yeah. And I find it fascinating. And it's really for the younger generation than me, because it's like this communal living. They have shared spaces and they have shared barbecue pits and they have shared, and I think it's great.
And you're but that's not what that meant to me growing up.
Yeah. Growing up, that's not luxury. Yeah. I'm thinking of penthouse level is luxury. Yeah. I think we've maybe is luxury degraded itself almost because the availability is so low. It's oh my God, there's an apartment. Is that luxury? No, yeah. I jest, but it's a serious subject.
There's something true about that though,
Could be, right? And when you see building in Portsmouth, they're doing great work. City of Portsmouth's doing great work. City of Dover is doing great work. But the two cities contrast each other, right? Mm-hmm. Downtown Portsmouth, they're building a lot of condos and a lot of apartments. Yeah. Right. And they are in Dover. But then you see some of the stuff that Dover's building, and the focuses are different. Look at Maggie Randolph on Harmony Homes in their tiny home village in Dover. Yeah. Huge press. And Maggie and her husband are gems of people. I mean, truly hearts of gold. But they've realized from the business side of things that if in order to help their business, they need to create housing. Yeah. And Dover's worked with them a lot, and a lot of developers, to allow for density and to build multiple units rather than one micro mansion or 4 units, 7 units. We can get 20 if we allow some density and relaxing. I think in Dover, the idea is, some people, the luxury is that tiny home, 800 square foot, 500 square foot house. That's luxury to some people. Yeah. I think the market, to your point, is perception. And I think that when you're driving around and you're seeing all the luxury apartments get built, just don't fret. That just means there's more units for things to move.
Right.
And when more units move and we infiltrate the market and we fill it with all of these different types of housing, you're going to see rents drop, and that's a supply and demand piece, right?
Yeah.
So the people here are like, there's not enough homes for anything. Why are they only focused on luxury?
Yeah.
And that's an economics conversation. That is a cost and economics conversation, which is driven by a lot of factors.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I saw too, I don't know how true these are, and you're not, I know you're not the expert on all housing facts everywhere all the time, but I'm going to treat you as though you are.
Good.
And even if 1% of this is true, it would be shocking. Like I saw a thing the other day that was like, if we just, I mean, this would never happen, but if we eliminated, like if we just, all the regulatory or permit approvals that are like holding up different parts of, like in process construction right now.
Yep.
If we just approved it all overnight, you could even see the cost of housing go down nationwide by like a huge.
Sure.
I mean, this is a fantasy.
At what cost, though?
Yeah, right. I mean,
So
every regulation is introduced for a good reason in theory at some point.
In theory.
But the balance is like, what's the, the devil's in the details.
Right. I mean, you got to look at, and I've always been a big proponent of common sense regulation and zoning.
Yeah.
And I'm not a zoning expert. Let's just preface, like, I'm not a zoning expert. But when
you're
you
1,000% more than me, though.
But when you look at the zoning and regulation that's out there, and you look at the way we do it in New Hampshire, I don't know personally, again, if it's very common. I'm going to use a word I love, commonsensical.
Sure.
Right? That was George Bush coined that, and I go with it because I love it. But commonsensical, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I find is a huge hindrance. So yeah, maybe if you just
I'm sure it would
removed
do
all
something.
red tape,
Yeah, right.
it would have an impact.
Yeah.
It would build houses.
Right.
But at what cost to everything else? A lot of these are environmental regulations, setbacks due to property rights, setbacks. There's all these pieces to it, right? But how much of it is common sense?
Right.
And when you look at for the various cities, I'm not going to point any out, call them any out, but when you have cities that where people want to build accessory dwelling units. And this is a 1-bedroom apartment, but they require like 4 parking spaces.
Yeah.
Well, is that a common sense piece of legislation, or was that intended to limit construction?
Right.
I'm not going to answer it, but you can do the math and you can think through that yourself.
Yeah.
And then you look at other legislation, which is minimum square footage or minimum acreage on properties, right? Maximum number of units based on square footage.
Yeah.
In one town, I mean, there was an ordinance passed that you could only have so many goats per acre, and goats need nothing for space. By the way,
that's a comical level.
Yeah, but
there are some of these we can make fun of.
But but you look at legislation, how much of it is it common sense, Andy? Really, and I think one of the biggest things of the state of New Hampshire, we are really big on our property rights.
Sure.
Right. But we're also big on letting, the state level is letting towns dictate zoning and regulation, because they believe that the town is going to be the closest to the people and have the best say on what legislation or what regulations and zoning ordinances go into place.
Yeah.
And there's an argument to me, maybe that's not the best approach.
Yeah.
Why? Right. Can you guess?
I'll give you a personal example. So I don't actually live in Tamworth. The border of my house and property is the border between Tamworth and Madison.
Oh gosh.
And you may or may not know this, but Tamworth is one of the 7 or 9 towns where there is no local construction zoning of any kind. So you can get away with, again, like up in the country, and my electrician jokes about this. He's like, yeah, there's a lot of, I encounter these DIY jobs,
sure.
and, some people are like, building codes are authoritarian. And then a lot of, and other people may say, well,
they
but they're good ideas though a lot of the time. So, but it's a balance, right? Of for every person who attempts to build something, where there's no zoning, I'm sure a lot of them do a great job, but other towns have it for a reason. And so it's when we were looking for a home, this was one of the things that we were wanting to have, because we wanted to be enterprising and yeah, we can figure it out. But property taxes are a lot more expensive in Tamworth, though. They're cheaper in Madison.
Right.
And I have to have, Bob out every so often to check out a permit for something. And, but it's all balanced. And that's That's my experience.
And the legislation should be balanced. Right now, what you find is happening, though, is that there's a lot of NIMBYism in the state. You want to talk? Do you want to?
Let's define that for everyone.
NIMBYism is the not in my backyard-ism.
Yes.
And you can go town by town by town, and you can go to public meetings, and you can go to town meetings, and anytime there's anything proposed for housing, you're going to have the loud people in the room saying, that would be great in Salem. Keep it out of Londonderry. Or that would be great in, and you're going to have the loud people.
I'm from Londonderry, so that makes me sad.
I was just, no, that's not a real world example. I'm just saying like that's, I was picking towns. And maybe I shouldn't pick towns.
I'm sure someone does say that though.
In every town meeting. And I go to my town meetings a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I see and I hear it, I watch it on TV, the different town meetings for the towns. And there's people who go up, like, this is going to ruin our schools and inflate our costs. Or this 100-unit apartment building is going to drive, bring in people that we don't want here. Right. And you just look at it, and the NIMBY monster is so pervasive that people in general, you don't have enough YIMBY angels or YIMBY monsters saying,
yes, in my backyard.
Yes, in my backyard. Like, the biggest thing, Andy, that I might screw my own quote up, which is horrible, but, the NIMBYism is just is prolific. And if you don't like, the building of construction of apartments and housing in your backyard, you're going to hate the homelessness in your front yard.
That's
right.
Wow.
So
I love that.
When you're going to hate it.
Yeah.
You might not like the construction in the woods that used to be woods behind your house, or that apartment building off of 93, or that, the workforce housing units, or even, Section 8 and in the government, the HUD bill. You're not going to like those.
Right.
But what do you do when you can't walk downtown and it's infiltrated with homeless people? So if you're one of those ones that hates construction in your backyard, you're going to hate the homelessness on your front yard, and you're going to hate seeing it. And as a human, you should look at it and say, people deserve a place to live. Yeah. Right? People deserve safety. They deserve somewhere. I'm not saying for free, but they deserve an opportunity for safety and for dignity. Yeah. And housing brings dignity. Right. Housing affords people a place to be dignified and to have that's their space, whether it's a rental or they own it. It doesn't matter. Housing is an essential thing. And if you don't like them building affordable units and those workforce housing and those affordable units in your backyard, then think about the tent cities that are put up and that people scream about. Right. Well, that's because guess what? They need something of shelter.
Yeah, they're not doing it for fun.
I mean, I love to camp, right? But I don't want to camp in January in a tent because that's all I have as an opportunity. Yeah. And that conversation can go many different ways and different levels. Right. But the basic of it is that, we need more YIMBY. We need more people understanding that, it's change. Doesn't necessarily have to change the look and feel and the dynamics of your city. Yeah. There's a lot of opportunity to build and have it not change the beautiful landscape of New Hampshire that we all love. Right. That exists and it's happening, and you don't even notice it half the time.
I just put a story in our Good News New Hampshire newsletter. Shameless plug. No, it was about this. I mean, and I put in, your LinkedIn page is like a really great, I just cheat. I'm a vulture. You all just find and repost all the good housing stories. And I'm like, that's good for my construction section.
There you go.
But there was a thing, you probably heard about it. I'm going to get the details wrong, but like the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests. Yeah. And a couple other people, they got that big chunk of land and they worked with like an amicable interested.
It's up in your neck of the woods, isn't it?
I think kinda. But they did something like this where they were like, hey, we want more workforce housing in this area. We also love this beautiful nature. Let's all work together to find a middle path to build some housing up here. And like
possible.
Would agree. And it was published in New Hampshire Business Review, and the title of that story was Best of Both Worlds. Yeah. And I saw that and I was like, how are we not screaming this story to high heaven? This is the coolest thing. We're doing it. People are doing it,
Doing it every day. And a lot of the times you don't even see it. And a lot of these projects that get built, the towns where these projects end up passing, the fears people have, they find out that they're not really fear. Right. Like they were just fears because they heard it from someone, or it's a long held belief that they never actually went and looked at the data. Right. I'm a data guy. I love data. Yeah. That's why I share a lot of stuff I share is data. But when you're looking at the after effects in these communities, if you go in and ask the community after, right, it didn't impact traffic as bad. There wasn't rampant negativity or bad actors in the streets destroying your town. Yeah. People needed a space to live for safety and dignity, and that's what they got. And these are like your retail workers, your nurses, your bartenders, your restaurant servers. People need a place to live,
Right.
And it didn't change it, and it doesn't have to. When you look at ADUs, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of carriage houses in Portsmouth and Dover, Rochester. There's a lot of places that were built. There's these garages, right? You drive by them every day. You probably don't even know how many ADUs there are. How many
Right.
people that live in that as an ADU that it was rehabbed into an ADU, and it doesn't change the makeup of your town.
Yeah.
It looks the same. It feels the same. You just got some more people in it, and you get people to do essential work that if you want to go to a restaurant and have dinner, right? You can do that because the staff is, they have a place to live.
Yeah.
They're not commuting an hour and a half to do a serving
See,
job.
I think some people would be frightened by that idea, but I think that's very exciting. Like this idea of like, I could be driving around and like, oh my God, that garage could be someone's apartment.
Yeah, now I'm going to scare everybody.
They could be everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, they could.
They could be.
That's awesome.
That's the point.
People finding more creative, dynamic, accessible ways to have housing. Whoa.
Yeah.
How terrifying. I think I'm unabashedly pro housing. That's my view of like anything.
Weirdly, so am I, Andy. No,
Yeah, I don't know how. Well, it's not like I'm sympathetic. I'm sure that like these are obviously super complicated things, but like I feel like the thing that I really want to get across to people is like we've been under building for so long.
Yep.
And I had the mayor on, Daiglin McEachern for Portsmouth, and he said it really well. He's like, what we try and do in Portsmouth, and it's as hard as anywhere in Portsmouth because it's like. It's like a 400-year-old town.
Right.
So every other corner is like, oh, this is especially zoned.
Yep.
We're up there in his office and he has this great view, and he's like, oh, that would be illegal to build today. That would be illegal to build today. That neighborhood would be illegal to build today. And he's like, we just want to be the city of yes. He's like, I view my role here, as like perfunctory as it is sometimes. I just want to try and facilitate, okay, you want to do anything? How do we get to yes, right?
Yep.
And that's... I think we need more of that.
We absolutely do. And Portsmouth is a great example. Dover, again, great example. You look at Claremont. I was in Claremont a few months ago, and for Fellows Day, and we teach them. This group that I work with at New Hampshire Housing, these professionals, right? And we teach them about affordable housing and the need of it. And you look at Claremont, New Hampshire, which was all about a bankrupt town. I mean, nobody lived there. The mills closed down. They had nothing. I mean, it was literally depressing to go there. Housing was valued at almost nothing because people couldn't afford to live there.
Well, people say the phrase "a depressed town."
Yeah,
and they mean economically, but it is actually
depressing to go there. But now go to Claremont, right?
Yeah.
Go to Claremont and you see how affordable housing, an initiative by a town, a local town government, to say we need affordable housing because affordable housing will spur economic development, which will bring jobs, which will bring more people, and it will bring businesses to our main street. And an investment from that town and some creative ingenuity of their story is they now have. I mean, it's booming. If you go to Claremont, it still needs some work. Don't get me wrong. Downtown is a work in progress, but there's people there. There's buildings there. Right next to it, Newport has done this very similar thing, and that is creative towns that say, okay, like we can't do this. Like we need to invest. We need to be creative, and they got creative, and now they have green space that they're building in parks, and it's just a beautiful thing. And this isn't. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
Like housing isn't rocket science. There's no silver bullet to fix this problem.
Right.
But it takes people willing to say, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Like I can accept that people need a safe place to live.
Right.
People need somewhere affordable. And when that gets better, my community gets better, and there's an investment in my community, and we can all thrive. Like it's okay for others to thrive. It's okay that you have development in your town. It's okay to want to see the place you live change a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe not all, right? We
Right.
don't keep that, what we love about it, but there can be change that's positive, and there can be change that doesn't impact the view, so to speak.
Yeah.
And keep the community and the culture alive, right?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned culture. I mean, again, I don't know, but my view is similar to what you're talking about, right? Is that a lot of these problems, I think, are downstream from culture, right? I mean, that's why you're here. That's why I wanted to talk to you, because my view, Matt, which I believe you share, is that like the world is better when we are more comfortable with dynamism, experimentation, and change, right? And I understand that's that's not a blanket thing. Like there's many things that, whoa, it's changing too fast. Like let's talk about it. But on the whole, I mean, what is NIMBYism, right? If not, everyone wants housing, and then they get it, and then they say, okay, great, I want it to stay exactly the way it was the day I moved in.
Right.
And that just means no one else can have what you have. And that's not fair.
No.
And that's not right.
It's not equitable.
And on the whole, I think that's a net negative for the world. So having conversations like this and just being like, actually, what do we stand to gain from more people moving in, building more spaces? Like there's actually a lot of upside to it.
Absolutely. Culture is infusion of culture from different backgrounds. Some of the best experiences of my life have been experiencing other cultures.
Yeah.
And getting to know people. And I think this could be a whole big conversation, right? Bigger. But when you look at the dynamics of the state of New Hampshire, we're not a culturally infused state. We're changing in a positive way. And that culture brings new experiences, new opportunities. And you're right. Like that's NIMBYism in itself. NIMBYism is fear. Yeah. Like, let's just call it what it is. Yeah. NIMBYism is fear of what I don't know and what I'm not used to. And it's a fear that something will change beyond my control. Mm-hmm. Right. I argue life is beyond most people's control. Yeah. Life is change. Without change, you wouldn't have grown up, right? Without change, you wouldn't have gotten married. Without change, you wouldn't have bought that car. Change is essential to life. And if we don't allow progress in that progress to grow and to change, we're done living. There's no life.
Yeah, it's a stagnation.
Yeah,
right.
And where's the power in that?
Yeah.
I mean, where's the positivity? Where's the happiness in stagnation?
It's not there.
Do you drink stagnant water? You don't want a stagnant life. You don't want stagnant housing market. You don't want stagnant culture. You need to be positively and progressively looking in the future for that opportunity to enrich your life and others around you.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you do a lot of great work, on this area in particular. I want to talk about your show. You've mentioned some of the other programs that you do. Like, so on that, I mean, we could talk about so many things, but this is the thing I want to highlight about you. You do work on the culture. You have your own amazing show, the podcast. Tell us about
so New Hampshire Housing, when I got there, I obviously talk a lot, right? And I wanted to have an outlet that we could talk about the good things we're doing in New Hampshire and New Hampshire housing. Mm-hmm. So we started the Making Homeownership Happen podcast. It got kicked off earlier this year. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus just due to scheduling.
Bring it back.
Yeah, it's coming. We have an episode. We have the next 6 months that we're fleshing out. So we should be back in December with another episode.
Just sneak it into your holiday playlist.
Yeah, right. It's on Spotify.
Where's there an extra 37 minutes?
About housing and home ownership. There's a lot to say about what we do and the good work we do, and I didn't feel like it was being called out enough, so I proposed it. To any government agency, it's a little scary having somebody speak publicly. I try to be eloquent. I try to be, toe the line.
You succeed.
But it talks about ways. It teaches our realtors and our lender partners about how they can morally and ethically do business and still build a business and be and thrive as individuals, but also the ways they can help people be successful. We talk about housing legislation. One of our first episodes was about the year of housing in 2024. That ended up not being necessarily the year of housing after everything was said and done, but good things did happen.
Right.
But we talk about that, and then it's a way for us to have a voice to people that's not just an email, right? But the consumers can listen to. Right. We talk about success stories. There was one episode with Mari, where she came on and talked about her experience. And that was really keyed into, I want lenders and realtors to understand what these mean to you. What does homeownership mean to you? What did this do by using these products? She got $60,000 in down payment assistance.
Wow.
Right. She got $60,000 to buy her home.
Yeah.
And she's a worker. She works. Her and her husband both work. And they were able to buy an affordable house that needed a little bit of work, but they were able to make it their spot. They were able to keep housing affordable. So we highlighted her. And we highlight the good stuff that our partners are doing. Right? How do they generate business by doing it morally and ethically? And how are they using our products to do it and feel good about the work they're doing?
Yeah.
So, the podcast is fun. I do a lot outside of New Hampshire housing too.
Sure.
I'm on the board for the Mortgage Bankers Association in New Hampshire for the New Hampshire MBBA. I chair the Young Housing Professionals Network. I chair the New England Mortgage Bankers Conference that's here in Portsmouth every year.
Wow.
And all of that, and the reason I do it all is because I've seen the industry do the bad things.
Yeah.
And I figure if I can have a say, if I can devote time, and I can inject my views and my thoughts, and I can ensure that people are getting all ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And we can have a voice for those who don't have a voice in the housing market.
Yeah.
We can make sure they're elevated, and we can lift them up and be an ally to those people.
Yeah.
So that's why I do it. And it's fun. There's a lot of networking involved. There's
Sure.
There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of talks. There's a lot of conversations. But in essence, it allows me to know that in the 20 years I have left, if I can keep this going, I'm going to leave the world a little bit better. Right? I'm going to leave the world a little bit better in the next 20 working years of my life.
Oh God, I thought you meant your
No,
life.
I'm not going to die in 20
And
years.
I was
But
like,
hey, listen, I don't want to do this
dude,
forever, Andy. Like maybe I will.
You're
but,
gonna live to like 1,000 years.
dude, I
old.
got 20 years working left. I'm 40, right? I don't want to work past 60. I can tell you that. Maybe even 15 years left.
Well, even
So-
I could see you easily. I mean, you're someone who I'm sure mentors many people. Even in retirement, you're going to be active in these things.
mentorship is important. I think if you don't have someone if you don't have a mentee,
Right.
and you're in this industry and in any industry, if you're a business person and you don't have a mentee that you're working with to help, then you need one.
Yeah.
Like I think I've had like 7 mentees throughout my career, and one of my good friends now was somebody that I've been mentoring for years.
Yeah.
And it feels good to be a mentor, but also it allows you to take all the stuff. You can help them avoid all the pitfalls you had to fall into
Right.
to learn the business. But it's a way to ensure that your legacy lives on, but also all of the good works that you're doing, you're helping instill in other people, which is why we started the Young Housing Professionals Group.
Yeah.
And it's why we do the things that we've done across the state to educate them and infuse that there's a way to do this and sleep at night and to help and to feel good,
Yeah.
and make money, because
Right.
it's a business and you need a job, you need a career, so you can do both. So keeps the world positive.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that is happening, and there's a lot to be done. I mean, I'll share like even my own views on these things, which I think kind of mirror. I hope that I can act as like a microcosm of like a generational shift in perspective change. Not that I speak for anyone, but like, and this is going to lead to like a bigger question that I'm going to ask you. This idea of real estate as like a wealth generating thing, right?
Yeah.
I think is people are starting to question that, and I think that's a positive thing. And it started to rub me the wrong. Like, I mean, this is a whole deep thing. Let me make sure I phrase this the right way.
Yeah.
When I was younger, and even still today, I know of a lot of people who like they think that real estate is like this get rich quick thing, right? Because this idea of like
house hacking,
passively owning property is like, oh, if you can just get some other sucker, like that, it's all a giant Ponzi scheme, and that you just need to find your place on top so someone can rent from you, and then someone can rent from them. And when I was younger, I was like, what the hell is the point of that? Like, because there's always going to be someone at the, like, when does it end?
Yeah.
Right. If that's how you think about it, of like a Russian Matryoshka doll, right?
Right. That's literally what I was thinking in my head as you were describing it. I'm like, it's like those little stacking dolls. Yeah.
And I understand, like, I'm sure people make money doing that, but like it didn't, as someone who's always tried to pursue like a mission or kind of values oriented path in life, that always rubbed me the wrong way of like, okay, you're going to go get your real estate license, you're going to do this thing, but you're just doing it so that you can like get passive income and be financially free.
Yeah.
What about all the other people that are renting from you, right? And I'm sure that, it does help, like there's a lot of value in there, but now I kind of see, okay, there's things that are good about that, but put it this way, Matt, what I'm trying to get across is that my sense is that, the real estate market has gotten like so crazy that, you do see this like weird proliferation of like, online. I mean, I know tons of friends of mine who like, they were kind of fell into this world of like, man, I'm going to get my realtor's license and then I'm going to like do the passive income thing. And like, I think you could interpret that as a sign of dysfunction in the market, right? That there's so much,
That's an onion, Andy.
Right. Well, there's money to be made, but I don't know. And
let's talk about it. Yeah, let's talk about it.
I don't know.
So
That's
you're
just my
not
opinion.
wrong to a degree, right?
Should we even be thinking of
your generation?
that?
And how old are you?
I'm 29.
20. Yeah, your generation.
I'm a
You're
zillennial.
You're
I don't
enough
know.
under. Yeah, you're a zillennial. So there's this big trend called house hacking. And there's
Yeah.
people online, and even in the state. I'm not going to name them by name because I don't want to give them any credit. But there's people in the state who are out there teaching and trying to teach people, oh, we'll get an FHA 203K loan on a multi-unit, rent it, live in one of the units, rent it out, and then eventually move out and just get the full rent, and then you'll be on your next property. House hacking.
Right.
It's a thing. Right?
Yeah.
Is it a get-rich-quick scheme? There is a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and equity you have to put into something like that.
Right.
There might be people who that benefits.
Yeah.
But let's look at the cost to society.
Yeah.
I am a firm believer that when you own your community, a piece of it, not just rent it, when you own a piece of your community, you're invested in that community. So let's talk about investment.
Right.
You're invested in that community. So what you have, I can't say it's a problem, but it's a problem. You take the city of Manchester, right? I love the city of Manchester. I love going downtown. They have great food, great nightlife, opportunity. I work in Bedford, so I'm there all the time, literally. But for years, corporations have been coming in and buying properties in Manchester, and all over the country. This is a worldwide problem. Okay?
Sure.
These corporations, large, not the mom and pop investor who own maybe one or two rentals, have been coming in, buying property, cash pricing, paying sometimes over market price just to snag that property, doing absolutely no investment into the property, turning around and renting it for more money.
Wow.
So that's not a new phenomenon. That's been happening for years.
Yeah.
Well, what happens?
And they can get away with it because the demand's there.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and people don't have the money a corporation has to go in and do a cash offer on a property, right? So what happens when you have a overabundance of renters who are struggling to pay that rent in a city or in a town anywhere in this country, right? What happens? You divest from the place you're living in. You don't own it. You don't care as much. And that's just something I've learned from working with people, right? Like I know people pretty well.
Right.
And when you talk to people, the reason they want to be a homeowner is because they want to be part of a community.
Yeah.
So if everybody's renting, and everybody can only rent because there's no ownership investment, then to your point, like that house hacking. So you could do it, and yes, you can make some money. I'm not going to lie. There is an opportunity to make money in almost anything. I mean, we were talking before this started about a friend of yours who has a business teaching people how to do stick shift.
That Cody baby, he owns Treeline.
Right. So think about that though, right? Like anything can be an industry. You can make money doing anything.
Yeah.
And house hacking is a real thing that people are doing. I think that a lot of those people who got a bunch of rental houses all of a sudden and are passive revenue stream are like, oh, there's upkeep. Oh, I have to deal with the water heater breaking. Oh, I have to deal with the roof not being safe.
If it was easy, everyone would do it.
If it was easy, everyone would do it. So is it as good as they say? I mean, I personally don't think so. I don't think that I don't think it's as rampant either. But there is a bigger problem with people not owning their communities because of the large investors coming in, swooping and buying up housing, renting it back to people, and people not owning a part of their community.
Right.
We did New Hampshire Housing is working on, I can only talk about this a little bit.
Sure.
But I've been piloting a study with a partner of mine, Alex, at New Hampshire Housing. And you might have seen it, the home buying survey. So we're running a pilot study where we've actually surveyed renters in the state or people who don't own homes, non-homeowners across the state. These can be first-time people. These are couch surfers. These are people who, some of them have lived in homeless shelters.
Yeah.
Okay, like they're currently living in a homeless shelter because they don't have a house.
Right.
And we're surveying these and we're asking very specific, thought-out questions to try to get the tone and tenor of the state. And we've been doing personal interviews, and we've been interviewing people. And in a lot of the times, we ask home ownership questions. Like, I just want a safe place. I just want a place I can own. I just want a place I can be part of. Right. And the survey is really getting to the bottom of people, in thoughts and feelings of what's going on out there.
Yeah.
We all know. We think we know. We know.
Right.
As a housing expert, I can assume and make some relatively educated guesses.
Yeah.
But these interviews and this survey that's going to be coming out probably January, you're going to have the official results out. We did it in partnership with Stay Work Play New Hampshire.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard of Stay Work Play.
Yeah.
And NH Business. So the article you referenced earlier.
Perfect.
So we did it in partnership with them. And the information is going to be coming out. And I think it's going to open a lot of people's eyes, right? These stories that we're hearing from people. And a lot of it has been, I want to own and I want to be part of my community.
Yeah.
I want to own my community. I want to I've lived here for 7 years as a renter, but I don't feel like I'm part of this community.
Yeah.
And it's weird how ownership, anything you own, you feel
Yeah.
a little better about. We bought EVs. And everyone laughed at me when I got an EV, and now I feel like I have some ownership in the EV stake, and I want to see them develop the EV infrastructure out. And
we need the chargers.
we need the chargers, man, especially up north.
Oh, man.
I'm taking a trip to Berlin in like 2 weeks.
Okay.
And Berlin, New Hampshire, and I'm like looking at the infrastructure this morning before I got here. I'm like, all right, I got to plan my trip. I'm like, I am not driving my EV to Berlin right now. Like,
Yeah.
it is not happening.
There's one station that's a little bit further north around there. We could talk about this more. But
anyways,
no, I know
investment.
that's
To your investment point, investment, yes, it's an opportunity, but I argue the investment of owners owning a piece of their community will take society a whole lot further.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I think you're right to point that out. And it kind of makes me think like, here's kind of the rub, right? And I want your take on this, because I also speak from experience. On the one hand, you have, like, in each community, right? Not to bifurcate people, but like
Sure.
you have owners and you have renters.
Yep.
And as you say, decisions are made by those who show up. And perhaps, more of the lobbying, right, or the influencing, or like people who show up at town meetings, like that's going to be people who feel grounded and invest in their community,
Absolutely.
right? And so I think that's a little bit why the NIMBY crowd, right, the people who don't want their community to change, who have a home there already, they're engaged, they're involved, they're far more effective as a lobby, so to speak, right?
They can be.
Than the community of renters who their presence there may be transitory.
And
right?
listen too, like I want to get this point across to
Yeah.
your. I have to interrupt that question because there's something I want to say,
Yeah.
and I'll forget to say it. Something I love when I teach advocacy and I go out and talk and about advocacy. One thing I really want to get: renters
Yeah.
have every right to go to town meetings.
Yeah.
Every right to talk at a town meeting about their thought. Renters feel they feel that they don't have a say because they don't own a piece of that town, right?
Right.
We just talked about that.
Yeah.
But they do. And renters, those people who don't feel like they should have a say because they don't own a piece of property and that they don't have a vote, they absolutely do.
Yeah.
And I want them to know that if they go and speak, nobody at that planning board, nobody will care you're renting, right? You're you're a citizen of that town, you live in that town, whether you rent or own, you have a say in its future. And if we could get more people to those meetings, even the renters, to give their renter experience, do you know how powerful stories are in telling stories at these events? That's how you make change. You tell your experience and your story. And if we could get more of those renters, I just want to, you own this. You're part of this.
You watch
get
the
out,
renters.
Get out and tell your story because it's impactful.
Yeah.
Right? It's impactful when you're talking to town planning boards and town members and those NIMBYs. If you can give them a real life human experience of the impact, you're going to change the hearts and minds of the people who are against it. And so renters, don't be afraid. Sorry, I wanted to get that out.
Well, no, I mean, you skipped right to what I was hoping to point you
All
to,
right, good.
which is that exact thing, right? Of like this weird quandary of like the people who rent feel like they don't have a right, or like, oh, I don't know how long I'm going to live here. Why would I care? Why would I go? Why would I go and try and lobby my town committee to approve more housing or change zoning, right? I get it.
Yeah.
I lived in, Newmarket and Rollinsford, and each time I loved those communities and I still love them, but I don't think I went to a town meeting in maybe like one time for a brief amount of time, but and so it's this weird like misalignment of incentives, right? And then the home people are always like, well, everything's great. No one shows up to these meetings. All my friends and I have homes.
Yeah.
Seems pretty good for us.
Yeah.
And they don't, like you said, they don't have that other perspective that there's this whole group of people who are kind of suffering in a way that's not visible for, the homeowner group.
Yeah.
So
they don't know. And I argue,
but renters pay property tax.
They do.
They pay it through their rent.
And they keep the
exist.
economy going.
Yeah.
Not everybody can and wants to own.
Yeah.
And that's a truth too. We have to accept, right? Not everybody. I have tons of people I know in my life, close personal friends. I'm like, you ever want to be a homeowner?
Yeah.
They're like, no. I love somebody else being responsible for the upkeep.
Yeah,
I just want to
gotta do
rent,
it.
and I'm happy there. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But for all those people that are renting that want to be homeowners, we need to find opportunity. We need to create more rental opportunities, which will in turn create more homeownership opportunities. It's a cycle, right? It's that carousel of housing. Get out. Your voice has a say. One of the things I teach when I teach advocacy is telling your story. And when I teach the fellows group, we go to Washington D.C.
Yeah.
Every year we go on this trip. We meet with this year we met with Chris Pappas's office,
cool.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen's, Maggie Hassan's office, all of their policymakers and all the people that are in their office staff. We meet with them, but we also meet with like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the big players in the industry. And what I always tell them, I'm like, guys, you can go in and you can ask questions and you'll learn.
Yeah.
But you could go in and tell stories and make an impact, right? Tell a story, a truthful one. Tell a story. Tell your story. How did this potential decision, how has it impacted humans? Give them something to chew on, because emotions, we're humans, we're emotional creatures, right?
Yeah.
And if you just throw facts at people, they might listen. Right?
Yeah.
But if you throw emotions at people, it hits them at a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And you can say, this is a story of like somebody that was impacted positively or negatively by NIMBYism or YIMBYism or high rents or a lack of availability or this and that. Right?
Yeah.
You tell a story. So when renters go out to these events, or home buyers, and if you want to make change in this state, start storytelling. Tell your story to the people that matter. If you have a dynamic story, tell it. If you have a friend with a dynamic story, tell their story if they don't want to. But use stories to win hearts and minds and emotions of people. That's what moves the needle. Because housing has reached this point where it's, again, I hate to sound so bad that it's affecting everybody now. Rich people, poor people, everybody in between,
it's
those
marginalized
groups, those less marginalized groups. It's reaching everybody, where the impoverished people are literally homeless and they cannot find housing in most places. And even the uber rich people they have less and less options with an inventory, and they're finding that they're moving out of state, or they're just not buying that next home, or they're not doing something because it's hitting them. So housing is bipartisan, right? So you can speak to anybody about housing. You can speak to anybody about your housing story, and it will mean something to everybody. So if you have a housing story, just tell it. Find a way. Use social media, right? If you don't feel comfortable getting up and speaking, like people like us who just will talk at any microphone shoved in their face, then use social media as a platform. Write a nice email, right? Record a video or an audio and send it. But your stories are what's going to change the narrative in this state. If you want to make this state better, start telling your story to anybody who will listen. And if we can get everybody telling their story, their housing story or the lack thereof, and how housing has impacted them, you're going to start making tangible changes. You're going to start lifting the veil on the housing struggles. Everybody knows it's bad, but they don't know how it's impacting people. And I think it's advocacy only works when we're willing to step up and talk about it. So
well, even this idea, right? Like that, I wanna take down. By the way, do you have a hard stop?
No, you're good.
All right, good to go. My next person's coming here at 1:00, so
we got time.
We got time. I mean, this is like
you're gonna edit a ton out of this, but
I'm not ashamed to just like talk and talk. I don't care. But yeah, I mean, this idea that like I liked how you phrased it. This is an issue that affects everybody, right? And even if you're someone who's like, oh well, I'm lucky, I got out, I was able to buy a house, and like now I don't care about that anymore. Like, well, think about it this way, right? When I was renting, and a lot of my friends are like, I care about people who rent because they're human beings. And I was a renter, like not so long ago. And I think about, man, how would my life have been different if in all the years that I've been renting, my rent was, $300 cheaper, $400 cheaper, because there was enough supply to make it cheaper, right? Like, okay, that would have been a life-changing amount of money for me, you know, across all those years. And like, and it affects me even now, right? Like the property, I remain enmeshed in this ecosystem, that we're all in. And it's like, we might as well orient towards something that's a net positive for everybody. And just because you think that, you found I want to get away from the notion of, well, I got mine. So I'll, who cares if the ladder's not there for other people, right?
So let's talk about those people.
Yeah, okay.
Let's talk about the I got mine people. Because I love talking to the I got mine people.
Yeah.
It's great. Do you have kids?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, great. Do you want your kids to build a life here? Or do you want them to move to Florida, Texas, California, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming? Pick one.
Right.
Do you want them to move? Do you want to see your grandchildren?
Yeah.
No, you can travel. You don't care. Like, you want them to be out of your life every day.
Right.
Well, if we don't solve those I got mine people, if we don't solve the problem for the next generation, if we don't make an impact and increase permitting by like 36%, I think it needs to be now,
Right.
and on a town by town basis, to meet the demand. Right. And the demand right now, we're at about 25,000 units short of meeting current demand.
Wow.
In the next 5 years, we're going to be 60,000 units short.
Yeah.
If we don't pick it up and if we don't find the silver bullets, right, that silver buckshot to the solution of this problem, it's only going to compound and get worse.
Yeah.
Is it possible? Totally doable, totally possible. But you need enough YIMBYs yelling a little bit louder, using their stories to tell the narrative of what housing means, and letting legislators, empowering legislators to make those decisions that are bipartisan, that they know are good for the state, and getting creative in how they used bonds and how they use various tactics and tools that they have, taxation, how they can give private citizens a little bit more of their property rights back, from that oversight, and how they can do, legislators can do that and make a dent. And they will. I think they will. I truly believe that they will. But until then, those I got mines, like they do for now.
Right.
They're going to be the ones that are going, wow, I really wish I could see my kids.
Yeah.
I wish I could see my grandkids. I wish I could see my friends Sue and Sal who moved away because they couldn't afford to live here anymore.
Right.
Those I got mines, they'll turn.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, but I wish others could have gotten theirs too.
Right.
And that will happen.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody dies, right? Eventually that tide will turn.
Yeah.
And I think if you could use the storytelling and you can use that emotion, you can step up and be a voice for those who either can't or won't, or don't know how. If you are somebody who's willing and you can use your voice to make some positive good, you can get those I got mines.
Yeah.
Because they will eventually realize that, yeah, great, but what about my son or my daughter?
Right.
Or my grandkids or my friend or my relative who I never see because they couldn't find a house.
Yeah. Or my caretaker.
Or my caretaker.
If I'm an elderly person who needs help, or just anyone who needs help, right?
Yeah.
So let's dig into that a little bit, Matt.
Yeah.
The solutioneering, the solving. I mean, I swear to God, I think I saw this the other day in the new Congress, that's just been elected at the federal level. I think a caucus is being formed about this. It's like the YIMBY caucus or something.
Yeah.
Which is a good
federal YIMBY bill that's been proposed.
There you go.
In my backyard. I will tell you this: the solution to our problem is not federal government.
Sure.
And that's not even because I'm like some small.
There's only
small
so much
state
they can do, right?
Because they really can't do much when they look at states' rights. But boil that down to the next level.
Yeah.
The federal government can't do much because of the states' rights. And our state constitution gives town rights.
Right.
Right. Like, how much efforts do we have? Because the federal level, they can make all the rules they want. And the YIMBY bill, now I've read it and I've studied it and I've had a lot of conversations about it. It's a good piece of legislation, in my opinion.
Take it.
Yeah, we'll take it. What it does, essentially, is put some weight back on the states to oversight for the towns. So, it's one of those things where it's still going to come down from the state having oversight on town level.
Right.
There are some things that our legislator can and will do that will, if you're interested in solving a problem, you need to look at the individual's rights of owning property and what that means. And that is a bipartisan conversation.
Sure.
That is a bipartisan conversation. And when you're looking at it from that perspective, there are things that we can do that empower individuals who own properties to build housing. When you start removing some of the red tape at the town level, you make housing easier to build. You make housing more economical to build. And when you take those motions, you're going to have people not building the mansions because that's the only economical way that they can actually afford to build.
Right.
Right. If you ask any developer out there, it's not feasible for them to build a small house like mine, really.
Yeah.
Without density in any scale, because it's too expensive. Ben Frost, who used to be one of our, I say our thinkers here at New Hampshire Housing, he has now gone to Rhode Island Housing, and he posted on LinkedIn the other day about how he was having a conversation with a dear friend, and he said, "You can't build a $400,000 house for $400,000."
Yeah.
You can't.
Right.
And there might be ways to do it, right? Modular home, manufactured housing.
Yeah.
But there's, the biggest conversation I have with developers is that there's too much red tape. It costs us too much.
Right.
If you're a builder and you want to build a housing development, let's just say you want to build one, I'm throw out a town, Dover. I don't know. And this isn't
Madison, eliminate all building codes.
Madison, right? Let's say Madison,
Please.
Right? A dear friend of mine, my mentor lives in Madison. By the way.
Do they?
Somebody who was my mentor for years, and they call it dear friend, still lives in Madison.
They don't live off Washington Hill Road, do they?
I don't know, but I will tell you that I always give her guff because she has like the worst cell reception in the world. I'm like, you must be in Madison.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
so,
true.
But let's take just like this is not a true example, but let's say somebody wants to build in Madison, right? That developer, before they even develop that property, before they spend a dime on concrete, steel, windows, roofing, carpeting, paint, cabinets, they're spending over $1 million or more just in developing the idea of building.
Wow.
And if the town doesn't vote to approve it, that developer's lost over $1 million.
Yeah.
So how much of that can they keep doing?
Right.
So if we keep saying no,
Yeah.
eventually, would you move on as a business owner?
Right.
Would you think twice about what you're building? And would you not want to invest much more into that town? We have to be careful. We have to be careful about what we do and what we say no to.
Yeah.
We have to be careful about what we say yes to.
Right.
But I think commonsensical zoning, as I like to call it, comes into play.
Yeah.
So
here's a question that will betray how little I know. When you say
how
like,
little I know.
yeah, the town has to vote on it. Like,
some towns, yeah.
yeah, like how
So
how deep does that go? Like,
it depends on what's being built.
Yeah.
So it depends on the current zoning, current registration. Town meetings happen. Every town is a little bit different, even though we have the same relative structure.
Yeah.
But if there's a major investment from the town or the zoning needs to be changed, there's often, depending on what it is, needs to get voted on by the citizens.
Yeah.
I find it funny, and this is again, this is a Matt perspective, not a New Hampshire housing perspective. But I always find it funny if you ever just take a gander in March at the town votes. Like look at the questions that are asked.
Sure.
And I don't know. I don't know if there's somebody that oversees how these questions are written, but like, I'm sorry, like I'm a relatively smart person.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a genius.
Right.
But when I'm having to read a new town zoning rule or ordinance
Yeah.
5 times
Oh yeah.
to
and
get the gist of it,
written in Shakespearean English,
let's like, I don't know if you know anybody involved in that, please like let me know. But
Yeah.
I go to town votes and I vote in my town and I look at the way that they're written. I'm like, can the average person understand this? Do the select
Right.
people in the town truly understand the way this is written? And they might understand. I don't. So I really have to sit there, and it takes me like a good solid 45 minutes to an hour to vote on like town zoning rules.
Yeah.
Because I'm in there Googling. Because I
Right.
have no idea what some of these things say. So now now I look at the ballot ahead of time, and I'm like
Right.
Googling ahead of time, and then I'm trying to like tell my friends, I'm like, hey, do you know what this is? What this means? And they're
Yeah.
like, really? I'm like, yeah. So before we vote, we might want to just like educate ourselves a little bit.
Well, I mean that's probably one of those things though, like not to be conspiratorial, but I would understand, like, there's this whole decline, right? In trust in legacy institutions. And
Yeah.
if someone was like, boy, I wonder if they do it that way on purpose. I don't personally believe that, but I would understand why they felt that way.
Yeah.
Right? Of like, whoa, it's almost like it's designed to make this hard to understand and hard to influence from average people, right?
Yeah. Read any. I mean,
that's
just
bad.
pick one, right? I think there was something about the age of judges.
Oh yeah,
On the-
right. And
so
it
let's-
was like the reverse of what you thought.
Yes. So my wife and I, we talked, and she goes, how'd you vote? And I said, I voted this way. She goes, oh, why? I'm like, because it was like a double negative. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, it was, and I don't know if it really was. I don't know if that's the right terminology. So like, nobody come after me.
I
But
voted on it, and it wasn't the way that I.
No, it was the
thought
opposite of what you.
Yeah.
By basic reading it was almost like the opposite of what you're at a basic reading level. What you quickly read through it was.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, oh, I'm like, no, did you read it?
Yeah.
And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, did you actually like read it? And she's like, honestly, I skipped it over. And my wife is brilliant. I've already told
Right.
you this. She's
Yeah,
a
she's
very
smart.
smart person. And she goes, oh my God. So she went back and looked. She goes, wow. I'm like, yeah. So like, take your time and slow down when you're reading these things.
Yeah.
I really think like some of the stuff that's happened, I'm like, hey, did you know you voted like to like limit the number of sheds in the town? They're like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. Did you know like you just voted to like limit the number of goats per acre?
Yeah.
Like, do goats affect you?
Right.
Like, are you negatively affected by goats that you think that that's a problem? They're like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't even realize that what it meant.
Yeah.
So and you look at all this stuff, it's so silly, right? We go, the
Right.
goat thing's a silly thing, but it's true. And that's just my warning to people when you're looking at zoning, when you're going to get to commonsensical zoning,
Yeah.
I urge people, read it. And if you don't ask questions, start the Googles, right?
Yeah.
The Googles is there, man.
Right.
Like Google it, like look it up. Do a little bit of research. Throw that thing into ChatGPT and ask it to clarify it for you.
Right.
Before you go into the voting booth, they post these things weeks ahead of time.
Yeah.
Go into the voting booth and just ask ChatGPT to transcribe it for you.
Right.
If you're finding it difficult or if the first pass you can't understand it, but like use some technology, leverage that, because I think some of the stuff that people vote on, I don't even know if they truly know what they're voting on.
Sure.
I really don't. I think
Yeah.
that they're thinking it's one thing, but really it meant something else. And then you're starting to run into zoning issues, and people are like, "Wait, what do you mean I can't have more than 4 goats because of my acreage?"
Yeah.
Happened to me.
Well,
So-
it almost, I mean, it's again, it's all downstream, like part of the issue, right? Again, to be empathetic to, the people writing these things.
Yeah.
Well, we know a lot of them skew older.
Maybe,
every state in New England is aging.
We're the second oldest state in the country.
Right.
Maine's number 1. We're number 2.
Yeah, and we have this issue of our legislators are older, and a lot of them are retired because we don't pay them, and
Yep.
not taking a stance on that, just an
No.
observation.
We should pay.
And they may not understand of like, oh well, I've been a part-time legislator or regulator or selectman for 30 years, and this is the language we use, and this is the way we publicize it. And it's like, okay, but not a single one of the renters in your town, in their 20s or 30s or any age really, they had no idea about this, and they don't understand. And like, what aren't you doing to reach those people? Because if you want your town to thrive in the long term, you need their perspective.
Yeah.
You need their input, just like you were saying.
Yep.
So I'm sure there's a lot of like shenanigans that maybe are not done in good faith.
I don't
but-
think it's malfeasance. I don't think there's
Yeah.
anything malicious that's going on.
Right, I think it's
just-
benign,
it's the way it is. It's been forever, and like they use these certain terminology and certain ways of writing for rules and laws, and cool. But
Right.
I don't know, a simpler explanation may be helpful to getting some common sense legislation. And I'm not saying like we have to worry about like the downgrade or dumbing down of America because of it,
Right.
but it's just not how people speak normally.
Yeah.
And I find that, in my years of marketing and business development and sales, you talk to people like you and I are in conversation, right?
Yeah.
You have a conversation that people can understand. And if you do that, you're going to get a greater understanding of what the impact in the real world is.
Yeah.
Which is why stories make such an impact if you get on the basic level. So
All right, Matt.
we're done.
No,
No, you got more?
no, we're about to be.
Okay.
Take us to the future. Take us to the I mean, you've given me lots of reasons. I mean, and I try and publish or republish all the stories I can about.
Yeah.
Hey, here's the developments that are happening.
Sure.
You've got your fingers in all these pies. You chair the mortgage conference, you mentor people, you do all these things, you got your show. Do you feel like the conversation is changing?
Yes.
Like, tell me
Hardcore.
about,
Yeah.
give us optimism, give us the future.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it a minute ago when I diverged into one of my tangents. When housing is bipartisan,
Mm-hmm.
it is affecting everybody. Sherm Packard recently was on WMUR.
Yeah.
You know who Sherm is?
Yeah, he was the rep from Londonderry, I think,
Yeah, he's
for a
the
long
House
time.
Majority Leader.
Yeah.
He went on. Yeah, he is. When I don't want to get it wrong, but went on WMUR and he said we're forming a permanent committee. Right, we're looking at forming a permanent committee on housing. Last year, the housing committee that Senator Perkins co-chaired with
A permanent or permitting?
permanent,
Okay.
a solid,
A
never
permanent
changing
permitting committee.
Yeah, no, a committee at the state level that is going to be evermore standing committee that will talk about housing and look at all the other committees and see how housing can be impacted.
Yeah.
Brilliant idea. Senator Rebecca Perkins Coco was
Yeah.
recently on WMUR. She talked about how she believes that there are true bipartisan things that could really make a difference for people. And that's moving forward. You talk to state legislators all across the state, and you talk to citizens and people. People are having conversations about housing that 10, 15 years ago, they never would have had, right? The average consumer is educating themselves more on housing and mortgages and house and affordability than they ever have.
Right.
It is positive. The future outlook, I really, truly believe that we are going to see some tangible changes in New Hampshire that keep us looking and feeling like New Hampshire,
Yeah.
that do what we love and be involved in the state. But I think that there is enough people impacted now, truly impacted, that you're going to see positive changes in the future.
Yeah.
It's a bipartisan issue again. It's bipartisan. It's affecting everybody from the impoverished to the super wealthy. Everybody in between is impacted by what happens in housing.
Right.
Industries, entire industries, businesses. Businesses are clamoring for workers.
Yeah.
And when businesses are saying, I cannot grow as a business because I have no staff to do that,
Yeah.
people listen. Right?
Right.
When people are saying, I want to go out to the Olive Garden and I want to get my tour of Italy,
Right.
and I go there and 50% of the restaurant's empty,
Right.
but they have a 20-minute wait.
Yeah.
Well, that's because there's no workers.
Yeah.
And you're seeing enough people impacted now. Honestly, Andy, that I really think we have a positive outlook on the future. I think we're going to get some commonsensical, but maybe comical too, depending on who writes it.
Take the goats out.
Yeah, take the goats out. Commonsensical legislation to go forward. I think we're going to hit that. I think we're going to. I truly believe that if enough people stand up and speak out, and people are, your generation and younger are vocal. Whether that's on social media, whether that's on podcasts, whether that's in public, in person, they talk. Stay Work Play has an amazing policies and pints that they go around the state. They're skipping this year. It's going to be next year. But they have another thing they're working on right now that young people, I went to a bunch of them, young people are coming out in droves.
Right.
And having opinions. Now, whether their opinions are founded in knowledge and experience, I won't get into. But they don't all have years.
It's better to be engaged.
It's got to be engaged because then then you learn. Your opinion is heard. Right, your feelings, your thoughts, your story is heard. I think that the Stay Work Play group did an amazing job with Policies and Pints. But your generation and younger, those millennials and Gen Zs, they're vocal, they're active, they want to be part of state and local government, they want to go and be part of a community. And the more of you guys that are out there saying that message and you're championing that cause, I truly believe because of your generation, not despite of it, that we're going to see positive change in the next 5 to 10 years. We don't have a choice.
Right.
We don't have a choice but to have change. To keep things the way they are and be 60,000 units short by 2030, you think it's bad now.
Right.
We're at 23, 25,000 units short.
Yeah.
Wait till we hit 60.
And we have so much to gain.
So much to gain.
So much to gain.
Culture, businesses will thrive. We'll get new businesses in. You'll see you'll see us, if we could reach, I truly believe this, and it's not founded in anything other than my gut feeling, but if we could reach that level of building to our need, you would see positive social and economic growth for the residents of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
You'd see businesses thrive. You'd see individuals thrive. Your kids would stay. Your grandkids would stay. Your friends and family would find happiness and a place to live. There'll always be trials and tribulations. There'll always be struggle and strife. That's life. Change is inevitable. But if you can meet the needs of housing and you can house with dignity and you can house with respect and you can give people opportunity, we all do better.
Yeah.
It's just simply all do better.
The Granite State housing renaissance is coming.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I've been known, if you do follow me on LinkedIn, I've been unabashedly calling for a national yet also local World War II like effort of infusing and in investing in housing.
No, we need it.
So there's a lot of different ways we can fix it, but whether or not my ideas are cockamamie or not, I don't know. But there needs to be an investment from top down. Federal government can't fix everything.
Yeah.
But it's going to take what's going to make the needle move is ordinary citizens like you and I having conversations, being willing to tell our stories, being willing to beat the streets, being willing to stand up at town meetings, being willing to stand up in front of the State House and tell your story. Call your local state congressman and senator. I mean, we were talking earlier, we're the third largest English-speaking legislative body in the country.
Yeah.
Your state legislator lives down the street from you. Mine does. I know right where he lives, right? Yeah. I know right where the other one lives in my district. Their numbers, their personal cell phones and personal emails are listed online.
Yeah.
Call them, email them, text them, right? Don't harass them,
right?
But let your story be told. If they're not willing to listen, keep calling, keep emailing, keep texting.
That's their jobs to listen to you.
Their jobs to listen. And if it's not, call it out, right? I'm that's again, Matt saying that, but have a conversation and let people know. Let them know how it affects you. They might not agree with you, but at least you've done your job, right? At least they've heard your story. So.
And the change starts here.
Literally.
With you.
No, with you. With you. You've got your voice on your podcast, and you get enough of those voices, you're gonna do big things. Bud.
Yeah. Well, I see solutions. I see progress everywhere, and for all the issues in housing, again, I think you're right in that, like, there is a real sea change that's happening of, like, it's now affecting everybody such that, we just build, baby, build.
Yeah.
That's what we got to do. And we're starting. I mean, there was an article the other day. It was like all of a sudden projects everywhere.
Yeah.
Something like that in the Concord, or the Keene Sentinel it was.
Yeah.
And I put it in my thing and I was like, this is great. I mean, there are so many seeds today that we're going to bear the fruit of, 5, 10, 20 years from now. And it's all thanks to some of the work that you do, Matt. So thank you very much.
Take a look at, I'll leave you one more thing.
Yeah.
If you haven't invested time, take a look at there's St. Anselm's College put out the zoning atlas.
Yeah.
We don't need to dive into it, but I want your listeners to take a look
When
at
you come
this.
back, we'll dive into it.
Yeah, it's the zoning atlas.
This is part
Check
one.
out zoning in your town. Do yourself a flavor, as I always say.
A flavor.
Yeah, do yourself a flavor, man.
Yeah.
There's millions of flavors in life. Do yourself a flavor and look up zoning. Take a look at zoning in your town. You want to make a change? Look at what you're allowed and not allowed to do and where you're not allowed to do it. And if you don't like it, say something.
I can't have 8,000 goats.
No, you can't have
In my
4.
backyard,
I couldn't
right.
have 4 in my own, multi-acre property.
Wow.
But take a look at your zoning atlas. Look at manufactured housing. Look at common sense things that just don't make sense and ask questions.
Yeah.
They may have perfectly logical answers, but unless you start looking at these things and you start getting educated on it, you're just talking.
It could be like, oh, they made this rule in 1817 and no
Right.
one's talked about it.
Literally.
Which is like, I feel like that's the problem a lot of the
Yeah,
time.
a lot of the rules are. Oh, don't even start on that. That's a whole nother podcast. But no, just do yourself that flavor. Get out there, take a look at the zoning atlas, get educated, be present, be available, be willing to share your story.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a lot of positive change in the state.
Yeah. Matt, it's been a real joy.
been an
We'll have you back on again.
Yeah.
With some regularity. I think that would be fun. And you can tell us all the great things happening in housing in New Hampshire.
I would love to. I think you get a great thing going on, Andy. I really think you do a great job.
You got a great thing going on.
Some days.
It's today's one of those days.
Yeah. It's a Monday. It's a good day.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Thanks, Andy.
Hey there, thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator and host of Granite Goodness, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.